And this will be on YouTube so that everybody that doesn't know we exist yet and wants to go back, they can actually watch all the different things that we do. So, and hi, Ben, how are you? And hi, Twyman.
How are you doing?
I'm doing wonderful. Thank you for coming.
It's a pleasure to meet you, Tony, Rob, Tywin.
Benjamin is from Arizona. He does the Arizona Spaceport Alliance, and that's where I know him from. They're building a spaceport out there, and I think they're getting closer to it, and they're working with the Intertribal Council. Yes.
Yeah. All of these avenues, they come at my doorstep because I represent the Arizona Spaceport Alliance, and we're site agnostic. So we're not specific to any site. And so anyone who has the idea comes to us initially, and we take it from there. But the tribes actually have some very good ideas. So, it's just a matter of performing. Yuma is Izzy said, is getting close to it. So we need to find an operator and determine exactly how that operator's license will work. And then we have the horizontal sites between Phoenix and Tucson that are gearing up through international interest. So,
Okay, so let me tell you what Space for Kentucky is. It is an initiative to get all of the companies, all the people, and everyone in Kentucky that have a desire to see space here and build an economy here, get them all together so that we can build synergy, we can expose people to space that may not have considered space before, and we can take a huge segment of the population and give them something to inspire them to be in STEM and to go forward and make it to where we have educated workforce that enjoys space. And we have so many different things here in Kentucky that can make things happen. In fact, one of the things about Space Tango is whenever I go anywhere, Space Tango is part of what I talk about. And Twyman is here tonight, and he is going to tell us about all the exciting things. So when we talk about space coming to Kentucky, space is here in Kentucky. We just need to make it more. So this is what Space for Kentucky is about. So Twyman is the CEO of Space Tango, and they are doing some phenomenal things that are inspirational to everyone. And I never fail to tell them about what it is he's doing. But I don't want to steal any of his thunder, and I'm going to let him tell you what we're doing. Do you have a PowerPoint you want to share?
Yeah, sure. I've got a few slides that can explain, certainly this is our ops center behind us. But I've got 5 or 6 slides to kind of explain the process and a little bit of who we are. So I'm happy to, if I can share, I'm happy to do it.
We got it.
Okay, perfect. So, this was a talk actually given, I'm taking this from a colleague of mine who gave a talk a couple of weeks ago at a bio conference, introducing our equipment and what we do. Really what Space Tango does is we really use zero gravity as this kind of new lever or unique lever for our customers to do research and actually manufacturing. So actually taking, just like temperature, pressure, pH, all these other things are parameters you change to take a raw material into a finished product. Gravity is one of those. And actually, so when we think of spaceflight, we think of rockets and rockets landing themselves and spacecraft. But it also gets us to this unique environment, this physics environment. And one of our, really what we pride ourselves on is finding the value in that and capitalizing on it. And the way we do that is we build autonomous devices that run experiments or actually this manufacturing in microgravity. So this is a little bit more about that. We do the design, certification, and operation. We're full stack in that sense. For research, for R&D projects, which across a kind of a variety of microgravity platforms, we really use the ISS, the International Space Station. We've actually had I believe 4 launches in the last 11 weeks, and we've had 2 in the last 3. We just launched our hardware on the Northrop Grumman mission earlier this month, and then a SpaceX mission last week. And really what we do is we take our customers' ideas and protocols, we take those and automate those and operationalize them to operate in 1G and 3 or 4G during launch, 0G for a month, 3 or 4G on return, 1G on, so, and what's interesting about that is you're in multiple gravitational fields, but you're also in a lot of different orientations in those gravity fields. So it's an interesting engineering problem. But we really focus on automation. Our big thing is automation in doing this. We do have crew members on the space station, but we use them as little as possible for repeatability, for control, and also as a precursor to hopefully autonomous stations or autonomous vehicles where we can do scalable manufacturing. So we're based in Lexington, Kentucky. We are, for those of you here in the state of Kentucky, we're a spin out of the Kentucky Space Program from about a decade ago. I was actually a student in that program, and we built CubeSats and worked at University of Kentucky as well as Morehead State, and then started doing some space station work, and that really crystallized, a group of us to then go on into Space Tango. And so a few of us who actually worked in the same lab at the University of Kentucky and others at Morehead have stayed with us here at Space Tango. So we're based in Lexington, but we also have offices at Merritt Island, Florida, and Houston, Texas. And then we launch right now primarily out of Cape Canaveral, but as well as Wallops Island, Virginia. These missions, I believe this is up to date, although this talk was given a few weeks ago, and we've had a couple launches since then, so I'm not quite sure if it's completely up to date. But again, a Falcon 9 rocket. And one of the interesting things is when we, because our experiments are quite time sensitive, we actually load them onto the vehicle 24, 48 hours before liftoff. So it's we just like a launch is, us prepping for a launch is the same way. We've got to bring all this stuff together in a tight coordination to get ready to hand it off. And quite the experience to actually see some science experiments go and be there on the pad, put them in. So we do our work in Cube Labs, and this just shows we do them in a variety of sizes. A 1U all the way to the right is about the size of a tissue box, and a 9U is about the size, close to the size of like a microwave, a kind of a small microwave. And these are sealed boxes. Crew doesn't open them. They basically plug into different power and data buses on the vehicles or on the space station, and then we control them from our operations station, and this is our op station here in Lexington. So this is what shows what they look like when they're on orbit. I don't have a lot of photos, unfortunately. Can't show a lot of photos of the insides of them. Those are a little bit proprietary to us, a little bit proprietary to the customers. I will show you a few examples. But when they get to the space station, they go in different facilities on the ISS, and these are 2 of those. Obviously, you can tell this is one of these photos is taken, or these were both taken on the space station, but you can certainly tell the right-hand one is because it's about a 20-pound cube floating in the aisle there in front of our Tango Lab facility. So they get up there, they plug into basically the station internet, and then we control them here on the Earth. Again, this is what that looks like. These are some of my colleagues in the room right behind me. We actually, when we're doing mission operations, we actually do talk to or interact with the crew when they're installing our equipment. You can actually see that on one of on the large left-hand screen. That's a crew member inspecting some of our Cube Labs and installing them during ops. So, and then of course we get the telemetry down, but that's also shared with our customers very quickly. So, one of the things I'll show you, this is actually my last slide, but this shows you one of the experiments that flew back in July on a SpaceX mission. And this is, in biological sciences or in lab environments, well plates are a common format. This is our version of one of those for a customer. And you can see us loading payloads. And this was taken about 4 miles from the launch pad and probably about 36 hours before launch. And so we have to load them. And one of the unique things about our work, a lot of it, since it's in biology or in the biological sciences, is sterility. And so you can see our team Part of that is for FOD, foreign object debris, but then the other part of it is for sterility so that we don't get any contamination. Because the problem is while you can verify that your items are sterile, it usually takes a few days actually. And by that point, the vehicle's already in space. And so we have to be very cognizant of that because we really don't get a second chance. But that shows some loading, and I won't go through all the subsystems, but from an engineering perspective, a lot of electrical engineering, software engineering, mechanical engineering, you know, every different discipline. But at the same point, it takes a lot of science input. You know, we have a science team here and who give us the inputs of what's needed and what's expected to meet certain you know, requirements. And then, of course, you know, I think the last thing I'd say is you know, it's not just science and engineering. Certainly, those are big parts of our company and any space company. But you need things across every, you know, whether it's you know, business development, legal, you know, graphic design, and that's one of the really interesting parts about the work. So interesting time, very funnest job in the world. But that's just my quick intro. I don't know if we're doing questions or anything, but that's Space Tango for you.
Well, I'd like to also congratulate you that you are in a new facility that you've moved into.
Yes, this one is relatively new, but we're always looking to expand, and we've actually filled this one up. We filled this one up pretty quick. We've got about 30 or something people, 35 people here. And so we actually had to rent another parking lot because we ran out of space. But you know, it's a problem, but it's a high quality problem. So, but I appreciate, yes, and looking for new opportunities.
Well, one of the things I always talk about when I talk to people in the state or outside of the state is I touch on LambdaVision, about how you are creating and working with them to develop artificial retinas. Do you want to expand a little bit on that?
Yeah, sure. That's a group. There's a lot of press about that. You can certainly Google LambdaVision. They're based up in Connecticut, and it's a great use case of where zero gravity provides value. And I won't go into the specifics, but we've done a lot of work with them, and really, you know, gravity allows for this proprietary layer deposition process that they have to be done. One, efficiently, which is great, but it's also more, the end product is better, and that is, you know, efficiency is great, but it still doesn't justify the space flight. What you have to be able to make is something that you cannot make on Earth, or and so that's a great example of it. And the team with Lambda is a great team to work with, but a good example, not knowing where zero gravity could be of value. And we've worked together over many years to fly their stuff. We've got several blog posts about them. There's several blog posts about it on the ISS National Labs website as well.
Well, and when you are doing biology up in space, is, for example, when you're layering cells, the gravity kind of makes them collapse. So that creates a whole different opportunity for a lot of these things to happen, like the artificial retina and the mixing of pharmaceuticals. That's when you were doing a lot of that when I first became aware of what you did when you were working with my son in high school and with 3D printing. Do you want to touch on the pharmaceutical aspect and how it's different
you know,
up there?
a little bit there. You know, there are certainly pharmaceuticals are a wide breadth. You know, there's crystallization, protein crystallization, which has been done on orbit for since the early space shuttle days. We actually don't do a lot of work in that specifically. There's pharmaceutical ingredient production through different kind of you know, through a variety of different protocols. We've done a little bit of work in that. You know, we have some focus areas. Obviously, the layer deposition is one. So, you know, there's part of our business that is certainly just taking the research that comes to us, and then there's part of it working with partners where we see that zero gravity is greater than just a scientific inquiry, but actually can provide, allow you to create something you can't create on the Earth.
And do manufacturing in space.
That's correct. That's our goal. You know, right now, you know, the question we always get asked, is there anything I could, you know, that you all sell right now? And right now, that's not, you know, nothing that we're creating is for for sale through us or any of our partners. But the space station being there is just a unique asset to use to determine, to kind of think about it as a business incubator. And there are next generation stations and other groups that are working on those now that are going to look to be more industrialized, because that really closes the business case. So got some work till the full manufacturing, and there's manufacturing, but then there's manufacturing and selling it, and so we've got some work ahead on that. But yeah, very, very, very interesting, very sci-fi work.
Well, and the saying is, space is hard. And
Yes.
so none of this is easy. And that's why we're all coming together to make it a little bit more supportive, at least.
Sure.
So is any questions that anybody has?
Sure. About 4 years ago, the pharmaceutical industry really started looking at this, but then they've since backed off. Are they more active now, or are they still kind of on default, kind of seeing what plays out?
Well, I think, I certainly can't speak to the, the whole industry as a whole, or the specifics. There are groups, Merck and Eli Lilly have some pretty public studies that they've done. I think it's ultimately it's what they're trying to accomplish, how long it's going to take, and time is money, and what's the return. And so I haven't seen that. But there's a number of factors that go into that. And I think, you could think about this as a top-down approach of getting, success is getting the big players, in whatever industry, to come into this, or success is that smaller players, more nimble players come in, find value, and then of course, whether acquisition or licensing. You can make an argument for both. I certainly, my approach is that it's probably more of a top or a bottom up approach, that it's smaller groups, smaller research firms looking at specific problems, find value. And I think you have to define the value. The value of space can just, it can be marketing, but it's got to be several levels deeper than that. It can't just be, it just went to space. It's not a, it's not a magical dimension. It is, and so that's one thing. Talking with any customer, you've got to be able to, depending on what their process is, explain what that difference might be. And it's not a, when you talk about zero gravity manufacturing, it has narrow use cases. It's not this broad thing of where everything's going to be made in space. It's going to be very specific, very low mass, high volume products.
And
Yeah, I
the
think that's the way
spin-offs.
it's played out. Yeah, space is played out that way, where if we just think about medium, small rocketry, at any given time, there's 80 to a little bit north of 100 manufacturers. But for a while there, they were really getting snapped up by the larger companies. And so now, whether or not that industry expands or grows doesn't really matter. The case study has been done at the lower level, and so maybe only Rocket Lab is launched, maybe Firefly, but it's really still the big players' game, but not for the entry. The entry is the small guy, sure.
Well, and the last number that I heard, there were 77 different countries that have developed space programs. So it's all new players. Is there any other questions first? I'm sorry, Tony, did you have any questions?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
So Mike, hey, Twyman, have you considered making things in space for things in space? It seems that, a lot of the requirements we have for making things, as we start to produce things in space to stay in space, a huge advantage of doing that, of making it in space. You don't have the same.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so
in 1G.
There's certainly potential there. Making in space for space, and there are other companies. Redwire is a great example, and know that team. And it's both for potential human habitation as well as building structures for radar and antennas, and structures for for deeper space flight. We don't have a focus on that. There's definitely a business there. We're just not focused on it because a lot of the like those use cases I talked about, there are customers who would whether it's in defense, commercial satellites, and then nations or national space programs who might need some of those services. But any of the things that we're working about, which are not necessarily in materials or large structures, your customers are on Earth, and so our focus is really our Earth customers. But there is certainly a value and a place in the broader space economy for that type of making in zero gravity. But your hedge there is building right now particularly large arrays for power generation, antennas or other things like that.
Well, thank you, Twyman. And
Absolutely.
I'm thank you so much for coming. It is
Absolutely
awesome. So the next speaker that I have tonight is General Rob Givens, and he works as the state director for a senator here in Kentucky. And he is one of the biggest champions of space and is getting that message out there. So welcome, Rob, and I can't wait to hear what you have to tell Kentucky and tell everybody else that is looking at Kentucky.
Sure. First, I will apologize without the video. I'm in a vehicle. I am not driving, so I'm being safe. But yeah, so the space aspect of it, and I really owe most of this to Twyman's organization. When I started working for Senator Paul as state director, I was invited to come to Space Tango to meet with the NASA administrator. And I was shocked that there was anything space related in Lexington, Kentucky. And I am a native of Kentucky, but spent my 27 years active duty, around the globe. And I was so amazed by what I saw. It started me thinking about how is it that Kentucky is not more aware of this? This accompanied with, as you mentioned, Izzy, about aerospace being Kentucky's #1 export, but more on the terrestrial side. Really got me thinking about, plus Kentucky's economic challenges of what do we do for the future as our entire economy in the East has been shifted away from energy production to essentially nothing. What can we do? And so that got me starting to really try and investigate what is it that we can do to make Kentucky a center of excellence for logistics for the privatized drive to space, and ultimately bring the military side of space into Kentucky as well. Anything that's going to go into orbit is going to have to be small and lightweight, and anything that's going to go, out of the orbit will have to be that. We're not going to make rockets in Kentucky, but we will make the parts for rockets and for satellites and for everything else that it's going to sustain us in our, exploration outside of the planet. And anything that's that small is air transportable, and anything that's air transportable can be from anywhere in the Commonwealth to anywhere on the globe in 24 hours. If you look at Kentucky's history, we exist as a state, primarily all of our cities and transportation nodes are because we were a good jumping off point for transportation to the West for the pioneer movement. And then later on, when railroads developed into crossing the major waterways, the Mississippi and the Ohio, and then as we developed into highway systems, the highways cross Kentucky, and we might be a flyover state, but we're more often a fly-through state if you're being a package sent from anywhere on the planet to anywhere in the United States, as it comes through either UPS, Amazon, Atlas, or DHL. So with that in mind, trying to find a way to package this and get this out, show what resources we can meet now, go to the major space contractors and ask them what their resource requirements are, show them how we might be able to marry them up from Kentucky, and what expansion is possible, I think is a viable way for the state to look at its economic future and bring all the other things along with it, right? So education, workforce development, and so forth. And it would be something that Kentucky could do forever, obviously, as we're either going to move off the planet or we're going to fail on the planet. So the more we can push towards this, the better off we are. From a legislative viewpoint, from Senator Paul's perspective, what we're trying to do is start those initial discussions about who all is in this space, pardon the pun, but who all works along these lines. How can we then take the one thing that we have in our office, which is access to virtually every industry in the United States? They have some reason to want to talk to us, talk to them, describe to them what we can do in Kentucky, and see if we can't entice them into coming. We have a great working relationship with the legislature, and Twyman, we need to get you in front of the legislature more often to make sure they know all the things that you're doing and what can be done in the state. And through that cooperative agreement, I think we'll make Kentucky a very attractive state for companies to be able to come in and do more. And we're on the edge of becoming the center of excellence for battery production for electric vehicles. What does it take to then transfer that battery on batteries and scraps? Every spacecraft has batteries of some sort. We have the potential to get there. We just got to figure out a way to pull it all together and get there. Yes, I've appreciated the opportunity to talk about this inside the state and as well as outside the state. I was in DC at a conference a couple of weeks ago, but finding a way to pull us all together and move us forward would be a great thing. And that's kind of my spiel.
Most people that I run into in Kentucky, they have no idea what space does. And so just getting that word out there of what it can do is huge. And you've been very good about doing that. I've seen you speak a couple of times now. So Tony or Benjamin, do you have any questions?
No, at this time, thanks.
Yeah, I got a lot of questions. I'm one of those that didn't realize that there was anything in Kentucky regarding space. Every state seems to have some element in some way. But for me, the priorities are really the railroad lines and how much access is to Kentucky in general. When I imagine the railroad lines there, I imagine them going up to Chicago. And so it's very difficult for me to understand how that plays a part. But once again, as you mentioned, Rob, it's not so much the big components, it's all the support components that go into every single vehicle and everything else. The way we put it in Arizona is there's space and space for everyone, i.e. there's going to be lawyers that are going to be developing new laws, and there's going to be insurance companies developing new insurance dictums, and that's going to trickle right down to the carpenter, so. And since most of these things are done on Earth, and in fact, almost all of them will be done on Earth for the foreseeable future, it stands to reason that a state like Kentucky is really going to play a big part in how this develops.
And are you able to talk about the logistics at all? Or do you want me to jump into that?
I think I'll let you jump in, Izzy. I know you've got a ton of information on it, but the thing, I will just remind you that our railroads run both ways, north, south, and east, west. And if you just look at Kentucky's position geographically, more things come through the state, and it's easier to get out of the state than you realize. Not to mention the fact on major components, you cannot discount the transportation through the waterways. And Kentucky is completely an integral transportation node with respect to that, with the Ohio River, with access to the Missouri River, of course, and the Mississippi, which is access, to the globe down through the Gulf. So, but yeah, I agree with you. There's space. I love that comment. I've not heard it. I will use it. I will attribute it to Arizona, as in there's space enough for everyone in space, because it is, and it is our future. I mean, it's got to be our future. And we see exciting things with our return with the Artemis rocket and the Orion spacecraft now, of which, by the way, there's a CubeSat from Morehead State University that is on that mission currently, and will be orbiting the moon for 6 months, tracking ice. So there are all these little things in Kentucky that can become bigger things. But Izzy, you've got great knowledge of this. I'm happy to turn that over to you.
One of the things about Kentucky is, like you said, bordering. Most of our state is bordered by river. That river actually runs almost directly into the Mississippi. at the tip, and we can be at Cape Canaveral. So we could make those rockets. We can't launch those rockets because we have too many people, but we could make them and put them on a barge and get them down to the Mississippi through the Gulf and hit the Cape eventually. That is a possibility.
And another thing is, for the interstate system, we are on the same interstate as Huntsville, Alabama, I-65. We're also on the same interstate. We have connection to the interstate I-75, right? 75 or 71. I get those two confused because I don't go to Ohio that much. But to Dayton, Ohio, where Wright-Patterson Air Force Base is, which is going to be a key component in the Space Force. So we're well situated for an in-between between space research military and space command and control from the military to be a logistical hub for Space Force itself.
And as far as aviation, we have two, not one, we have two international airports here in Kentucky. And we have, I think it is 57 general aviation airports, 57, 58. So aviation is a huge thing. The northern part of our state has a lot of manufacturing, from making brakes to, but there's lots of major players that make jet airplanes up in the northern part of the state.
How many of the primes are in Kentucky? Almost all of them, you would say?
How many what?
Honeywell, Raytheon, etc.
Honeywell is.
Yeah,
Raytheon is.
Raytheon is. BAE is. They're in small. I mean, they're not in. BAE's got quite a huge facility, and Raytheon does in Louisville as well. Or most of the majors are represented, but that's something that we could really expand on.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, we build parts of the big aircraft. So there's a lot of opportunity there. We have railroads. We have a great infrastructure for highways that, in my opinion, I have been all over this United States, and it is one of the best highway systems that I have been a part of. So you can tell immediately when you roll into Kentucky that the roads are just fantastic for the most part. There's a couple of areas that, as with anything, that needs to be worked on, but it is an amazing infrastructure, and it keeps getting better. We are going to be a large hub for electronic batteries for the electric vehicles, and
it's cheap to live here.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, very much so.
Tennessee and Kentucky are they're drawing in a lot of people for sure. Yeah.
And it's nice. It's a beautiful state, in addition to being affordable.
You were talking about energy earlier. I might be speaking ignorantly, but I'm not sure it's restrained by borders, but is the Tennessee Valley Authority dictate the energy in Kentucky?
Yes, Tennessee Valley Authority is who we are at odds with currently, because they promised to keep a couple of the coal-fired plants open, and they have shut them down and destroyed them. The Paradise plant in Muhlenberg County, Kentucky, is a prime example, which provided a lot of power. I mean, so we had abundant power and it was cheap in the state, and now this is a logistical issue we're going to have to overcome if we're going to try and meet what we're promising here about what Kentucky could become for manufacturing. So yeah, TVA is actually one of the culprits.
Yeah, we got the same thing here in the reservation. They just shut down the plant and decommissioned it. They're building houses there.
How are they generating electricity in that area then?
Well, we have a nuclear plant, so we have more than enough energy. Arizona is a nuclear state, so yeah.
I don't think we are we?
We are not, but there are proposals to make us one, and I mean, we're looking at about a 5-year lead, 5-year delay time, but it's possible. And we have the thing that, and I don't want to bring politics into any of this, of course, but we have a very friendly legislature currently to things that we want to try. But there is the chance of us having smaller nuclear reactors that would provide abundant, cheap power, obviously, and hopefully we'll see that happen. We'll see movement on that in the next year, hopefully.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. It's the cleanest. I mean, short of an actual catastrophe, it's just there's nothing cleaner, nothing safer, and it's so remarkably dense, the energy that you get out of it, that you don't really have to worry about capacity. So what's
Tony, did
Kentucky
you have,
known for in manufacturing?
well, aerospace parts?
Really? Okay.
Yes. That was it was kind of a surprise when it happened. They, I guess it was about 4 years ago, 5 years ago, that they all of a sudden said, hey, aerospace we're one of the top in the country for aerospace. And then they started doing some research into it and discovered that we were quite impressive in aerospace manufacturing, between
That's
airplane brakes and things like that.
that's a big problem, as you know, Izzy, for us in Arizona, because aerospace is enormous here, but space is very, very small component of our aerospace market. And that's one of the things that we're hoping to work on, specifically because California is right there, you know, and so yeah, that's a big push. Is how do you get aerospace companies to start thinking more about space components, and what's the tipping point? Because you can't throw a lot of money at manufacturing something that doesn't sell too often. You have to throw it at what's going to be, you know, what's going to move units.
Well, Kentucky Aerospace Manufacturing just had their annual meeting, and space was a major topic. They had the former NASA gentleman before Nelson, Jim. I'm gonna pronounce his name wrong.
Breitenstein.
Yes,
Oh,
thank you.
Einstein. Yeah, sure.
He was one of the speakers there, and they had a lot of discussion about space. So I think we need to develop space for nothing else, for defense. You know, if we rely on all of our components to come from overseas, in particular, people that do not have our best interests in having us go to space, then we need to make those parts here. And we can do that. I don't see why we can't. Somehow, some way.
Hey, Izzy, are there any more
Mhm.
questions for me? I need to run if not.
Tony, do you have any? Ben?
No.
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming. And this will be online, and I'm going to actually work in some slides so that we're not just looking at talking heads, and get some other images up there too. So I'll let you know what the links are when I get them all created and saved. Okay.
Thank you. Appreciate it very much.
And I
It's very
appreciate
nice
you
to meet
coming.
everybody. Yes, ma'am. Anytime.
Yeah, pleasure.
See ya. And did you guys have anything more you wanted to discuss? You want to introduce yourselves for it, because this is going to be going on video, and this is
We talked a little bit before you got started, but yeah, I've been doing space operations for a little over 25 years. I started back in '99. I've done missile warning, SSA, launch and early orbit, nav warfare, the global TT&C operations, MILSATCOM orbital analysis, SDA orbital warfare. I've been an engineer where I've integrated the Iridium commercial SATCOM. So I've been doing space for a long time. My family roots are in Kentucky. I currently live out here in Stuttgart, Germany. But I have every intentions eventually to get back to Kentucky. Both me and my wife would love to retire in that area. And so seeing what you're doing out there already just made me all excited about seeing what we could do to help get plugged in and where we can support. But thank you.
well, and one point I'd like to make is, for you and for everybody else that's watching that may have an interest, is, you know, space is brand new, really. Even though it's only 50 years old, it's still kind of new, and we can kind of create what we want it to be. And that is one of the amazing things. So if we want to see something developed in Kentucky, you know, we're at the ground floor. I mean, Artemis just launched a new era. You know, we can make it what we want it to be. So if there's something in particular you would like to talk about, do you want to have guests that show up, please let me know. This is all about education. And so if there's something in particular you want to see,
Well,
I know
noticed,
that, go ahead.
I noticed here that Kentucky Space nonprofit consortium exists, and there's a lot of university participation, but when was that established? How old is this? Do you know?
Oh, I have no idea.
Has it been around a while, or is it fairly new? It's
Well,
one of those things that you just don't know until you see it, and you start to ask questions.
yes. They've been around since I've been doing this. And I think Twyman talked about how when he was in college, that's how he got involved in space, and what actually created Space Tango was NASA Kentucky working with the UK. And I know UK works with a lot of people outside of Kentucky. Strata Dynamics, which is a company that I interviewed back a couple months ago, they do a UAV flyer that goes up to almost where the highest any of them have ever been. And it's like 1% oxygen, how high they went. And they sniff the atmosphere. So they're able to detect turbulence, and they're able to detect, do different kinds of projects for pollution and monitoring. And that was all with a grant from Kentucky, University of Kentucky. And Ecuador has some projects that they're doing with their space program that they're trying to get off, and they've worked with University of Kentucky. So University of Kentucky and the NASA grants there, they have a wide reach. They really do. And the Strata Dynamics is out of Canada. So a lot of international ties. Is there anything else that you want to touch on before we call it a night?
Well, I will tell you this, as I mentioned earlier, part of my job out here now is some of that security cooperation with our partners out here in Europe. But I did attend the IAC in Paris a couple months ago. That's kind of their space symposium, but
Yes.
they had all their European vendors kind of showing off what they're doing. So the European Space Agency is a huge agency. Every country has their own space agency, and then so many of them have their own defense. But just like America, man, they are smart technical engineers, and there's always opportunities for partnerships. So even there may be opportunities for Kentucky to look at those partnerships overseas as well, as we're looking at beefing up and building a better economy with Kentucky.
Well,
Yeah.
space is going to happen. That genie's out of the bottle. It does not matter what our Congress votes on, what bill, how much of the budget is going to get allocated to it. Space is going to happen, but it may not be with us if we don't choose it to be. So, it is important that every country, that they're deciding to go for space, and they're going to outreach us like China. China is doing some amazing things in space right now that we know of, and what we don't know of, we have no clue. But if we don't take that leadership position, somebody else will.
Yep.
Yeah, it'll require partnerships.
Yes.
The one thing I know about Europe is that there are a lot of companies there, and they all want to be in the United States. But
All right. Well, if there's nothing else, do follow us on LinkedIn. I mean, that's how you found me to begin with, is LinkedIn. I love LinkedIn. It's a great platform. And actually, that's how I met Ben. No, did I meet you on LinkedIn? I met Karen and you at SpaceCom. Was that the first time I met you?
Met face to face the first time. Yeah. It's hard to know where you met at this point. It's just way too difficult. In fact, I'm already connected to Twyman. I had no idea. So 3 years ago, I met him somehow. That's the way it goes.
Space Tango is doing some amazing stuff. And Redwire, which is right outside of Louisville, is doing some amazing stuff. They bought Made in Space. They acquired Made in Space, which does the Z-band, which is the fiber optics. And it's amazing the difference between what's made in space and what's made on planet. It's the crystals are so much cleaner and more pure that they can make in orbit than what they can make here. And then they're doing 3D printing of human hearts that actually beat. So they're able to take cells. Ultimately, the goal is to take stem cells, which are from your skin now, and 3D print you a heart that doesn't get rejected by your body. And when I talk to people, I say, you know, what's the one question they have is, why can't we do that here? Well, when you're 3D printing, it's like printing with water and it collapses on itself. But when you have no gravity, then the structure has time to take form and you can create things like human hearts, or I think they're working on a pancreas as well. And there's all kinds of disease research like Parkinson's and Alzheimer's that are being done on the International Space Station, that they're able to study different crystal sizes and the clarity of it and go much farther, much faster than what they would be able to do here. So there's a lot of opportunity.
Are those universities doing this?
Well, Redwire is doing the hearts, and they're probably working with a university. Most people are
Right.
collaborating with some university. That's kind of a given, is that you have to have some kind of partnership with university, like what Arizona does. You're working with ASU and you work with ASU and the state. There's another
Arizona
university
Space
that you're
Initiative. Yeah.
Yes. So
Yeah.
I'm writing about it right now.
That's nice. Yeah. Yeah, it takes
I'm in that
university
chapter.
to, yeah, that's where the money's coming from right now
Yes.
for almost everything. We're at the point now where we're trying to make the business case for some of these locations, because the space case is pretty much made. It's like you said, it's unstoppable. Everyone's trying to figure out how they go from aerospace to space, and you just can't afford to do it. So you have to have a science problem for the university to solve for you, and that's how you get the money. If you give them a problem to build a curriculum around, they'll figure it out, as long as they already have the department. And yeah, so
yeah, it's all good. It's all good. All right. Well, I hope you guys have a wonderful night, and I know it's really late where you are. What is
That's
it?
right.
1 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
that's crazy.
It's really early where you are.
It's
So
early enough. Yeah.
So I'm glad you both could make it, and I hope to see you next time. And this is only the 3rd episode. This is the 3rd
Great.
meeting, so I hope it will continue to grow, and I'm gonna just keep making it grow.
Great.
So
Sounds good.
awesome.
All right. Thank you.
Thank
Pleasure
you.
meeting you, Tony. Bye, Izzy.
Have a good night.
Have a good night.